それではこれから名古屋市教育委員会主催 LA のスクールカウンセリングを通して全ての子どものウェルビーイングを考える子どもの支援に関するフォーラムを開催いたします。フォーラムの構成は2部構成になっております。第1部の講演は名古屋子ども応援委員会主任総合援助職川岸明子さん、アメリカ LA からお招きいたしました講師陣のロサンゼルス同一学区カウンセリングコーディネーターのディクソン・ペレイ博士、そしてバーミンガムコミュニティハイスクールカレッジカウンセラーのエリカ・ロペス氏にお話を頂戴いたします。第1部と第2部の間に5分の休憩時間を挟みます。第2部は第1部で登壇された LA のカウンセラーのお二人と名古屋の子どもたちを支援するため日々活動をしている名古屋子ども応援委員会の職員が質問したり相談したり現場の声を伝えて共感したりといった内容で進めてまいります。それでは第1部名古屋子ども応援委員会主任総合援助職川岸明子さんの講演です。川岸さんは臨床心理士公認心理士の資格を持ち2005年から非常勤スクールカウンセラーとして活動しており2016年に名古屋子ども応援委員会のスクールカウンセラーとなりました。2020年から主任総合援助職として活動しております。川岸さんは名古屋子ども応援委員会の制度や取り組みについてのお話をします。それでは川岸明子さん、よろしくお願いいたします。
ご紹介に賜りました子ども応援室主任総合援助職の川岸です。ちょっと緊張しています。私からは20分ほどお時間をいただきまして子ども応援委員会の成り立ちや活動内容についてお話しさせていただきたいと思います。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。まず名古屋子ども応援委員会が設置された経緯や活動する上での理念についてお話しいたします。名古屋子ども応援委員会は2013年の7月に市内の中学生が自死をされるという悲しい出来事がきっかけで設立されました。名古屋の河村市長が二度とこのようなことが起こらないようにしたいとの思いを持ち、姉妹都市であるロサンゼルスを訪問した際にアメリカの学校における支援体制を調査し、2014年に子ども応援委員会を設立しました。後にもお話ししますが、それまでもスクールカウンセラーは全国的に配置されておりましたが、非常勤で週1回程度の勤務が標準でした。常勤の専門職をチームで配置するというのは画期的なものでしたし、今でも全国的には珍しい組織と言われています。スタート時は名古屋市内の11の中学校を拠点に11のブロックを作り、そこに4つの職種の専門職を配置しましたので、最初の年は学校現場には44名が配置されました。組織が活動するには根本となる考え方、その組織の理念がございますが、名古屋市では現在一人一人の人生の基盤としての理念に基づいて支援を行うことが推奨されています。名古屋子ども応援大綱に掲げられているものです。あなたも私も今ここにいたいと思える場を作るという理念で、従来の人間観、社会観、教育観を見直すもので、ケア論に準じています。この理念が市の行政に広く浸透することで、問題が解消することを目指しています。次に名古屋子ども応援委員会の組織についてお話しいたします。 名古屋市についてのお話をする前に、日本でのスクールカウンセラーの歴史について少しお話しいたします。日本ではいじめの深刻化や不登校児童生徒の増加など、児童生徒の心のありようと関わるさまざまな問題が生じていることを背景として、学校外の心理の専門家を積極的に活用する必要が生じたことから、スクールカウンセラーが誕生しました。1995年のスタート時は全国で154校、愛知県ではたった3校のみの配置でした。今ではスクールカウンセラーの配置は全国的に当たり前になっておりますが、未だにほとんどが非常勤での配置です。各自治体によって勤務時間は異なりますが、全国では平均週1回4時間から8時間勤務といった学校が多いようです。こちらは名古屋子ども応援委員会のリーフレットから一部抜粋したものです。さまざまな悩みや心配を抱える子どもや親を総合的に援助するため、常勤の専門職を学校現場に配置しています。子どもたちと普段から関わりながら、すべての子どもたちの健やかな発達を支援し、子どもたちが主体的に人生の進路を探すことができるよう応援していますとあります。常勤の専門職、すべての子どもたち、人生の進路というところが特に特徴的で、全国的にも珍しいと言われるゆえんでもあります。ここで名古屋子ども応援委員会の職種のそれぞれの役割をご紹介いたします。まず一番人数が多いのはスクールカウンセラーです。名古屋市立の中学校は110校あるのですが、そのすべてにそれぞれスクールカウンセラーが常勤で配置されています。心理の専門的知識・経験を生かして、心理教育等の観点に基づいた学校生活全般への援助を行います。詳しい活動内容についてはまた後ほどお話しします。そしてスクールソーシャルワーカーです。各ブロックに1名から2名配置されています。社会福祉の専門的知識や経験を生かし、児童生徒が置かれた環境への働きかけを行います。また区役所、児相、地域役員など関係機関との連携調整を行います。次にスクールセクレタリーです。ブロック内の職員の労務管理、予算管理を行います。最後にスクールポリスです。警察 OB です。学校内外の見守り活動や必要に応じて警察との連携を行います。名古屋市にはご存知の通り16の行政区がございますが、それぞれの区で活動する職員を一つのチームにし、ブロックと呼んでいます。名古屋市立の高校特別支援学校をまとめたブロックも一つございますので、現在は17のブロックで活動しています。ブロックの拠点となる中学校を事務局校と呼んでおりまして、その事務局校にご紹介した4つの職種の職員が常駐しております。その他の中学校にもスクールカウンセラーが1名ずつおりますので、一番小さなブロックでは6名、一番大きなブロックでは16名で活動しています。また、私のような主任総合援助職という立場の職員が8名いるのですが、それぞれの主任が2つから3つのブロックを担当し、ブロックの支援活動が円滑にいくようにマネジメントを行っています。応援委員会のスクールカウンセラーの保有する資格ですが、大方の職員が臨床心理士の資格を保有しています。公認心理士を持っているものも多く、両方とも持っている職員もかなり多くいます。ただ、大学院を出たばかりの新卒者も採用しているため、資格取得見込みのものも若干名おります。ちなみにスクールソーシャルワーカーは、社会福祉士か精神保健福祉士を持っていまして、両方持っているものもいれば、公認心理士を持っているトリプルライセンスのものもおります。常勤スクールカウンセラーについてもう少し詳しくお伝えいたします。応援委員会に所属する常勤スクールカウンセラーは幅広い年齢層となっています。20代から60代まで、一番多くいるのが30代と40代なんですけれども、20代だから活躍できないというわけでもありませんし、逆もまたしかりです。また毎年地元以外の地域から応募してくださる 方も結構いらっしゃいますので、職員同士が交流することによって他の地域の文化や心理の事情などを知ることができて、活発に活用できています。北海道から沖縄まで全国津々浦々、さらにアメリカから応募してきたというものも若干名所属しております。また、勤務経験領域としましては、名古屋市の非常勤スクールカウンセラー経験者が 30% ほどおりますが、他にも幅広い領域から応募があります。非常勤スクールカウンセラーについてもご説明させていただきます。以前は名古屋市の非常勤スクールカウンセラーは指導室の所管でございましたが、令和2年度から子ども応援室に所管が移っております。小学校は262校あるのですが、すべての学校に令和3年度から年間280時間の予算がつきました。それまでは70時間か140時間だったので、随分と活動の幅が広がったと思います。さらに今年度からは名古屋市立の幼稚園全20園にも年間70時間ずつ配置されており、幼少期から高等学校まで途切れのない支援が行われるよう目指しております。ここで子ども応援委員会が活動する中学校の一般的な組織についてご紹介いたします。標準的な中学校ではこのようなちょっと組織図を作ってみましたが、学年の集団がありまして、そちらの集団が割と単位となって、かつ子どもたちの指導をされていることが多いなと感じております。非常勤スクールカウンセラーは校長の管理のもと業務をされていることが多いのですが、名古屋市の常勤スクールカウンセラーは子ども応援室に所属しておりますので、学校教職員と共同連携しつつも応援室からの指揮命令系統となっております。はい、こちらはですね、ちょっと古いデータで2015年度の学校基本調査のものなんですが、日本、アメリカ、イギリスの小中学校における教職員の総数に占める教員以外の専門スタッフの割合を示したものです。アメリカやイギリスの学校では 50% 近く教員以外の専門スタッフが在籍しているにもかかわらず、日本はたった 18% となっています。ですから日本の子どもたちは学校の中で出会う大人といえばほとんどが先生ということになりますし、先生方が多くの仕事を担っているということでもあります。それではここからは名古屋子ども応援委員会の活動について具体的にお話しいたします。文部科学省ではスクールカウンセラーの業務をこのようにまとめています。1から7までございまして、結構多岐にわたった活動となっております。子ども応援委員会では支援を大きく3つの段階に分けて考えています。予防という観点を大切にして支援を行っていますが、一時的予防は問題が起こらないように問題を未然に防ぐ未然防止の取り組みです。対象者はすべての子どもたちとなります。二次的予防は苦戦している一部の子どもを対象としています。問題が大きく表面化していないけれど遅刻が増えた、授業中の居眠りが増えているなど、何か問題を抱えているかなという児童生徒を早期に見つけ、早期対応することで問題をいち早く解決に導く対応です。三次的予防は特別なニーズのある特定の子どもを対象としています。不登校やいじめ等の問題が表面化した児童生徒に対してこれ以上の重篤化を防ぐという対応です。子ども応援委員会はこの図のように一時的予防に重きを置き、問題が大きくならないように防ぐことを念頭に活動を行っています。もう少し具体的にそれぞれの支援についてお話しいたします。一時的予防です。朝の登校を見守り、子どもたちと挨拶を交わしながらコミュニケーションを取ることで顔を知った関係を作ります。そのことが声のかけやすさへとつながり、いざという時のスクールカウンセラーとの面談のハードルを下げ、相談しやすい環境づくりにつながっています。名古屋市では小学校4年生、中学校1年生を対象として、非常勤と常勤のスクールカウンセラーと協力して全員面談を行っています。実施方法は学校によって様々ですが、 スクールカウンセラーは学校と実施の目的を共有し、学校の状況に合った方法で実施しています。そして心の授業、心理教育も行っています。内容は自己理解、自殺予防教育やストレスへの対処法など様々です。子どもたちが知識としてストレス対処法や怒りのコントロール方法を習得し、また困った時や辛い時など、いざという時にどういう行動を取ればよいかということを学ぶことで、学校での生活しやすさへとつなげております。さらには毎日子どもたちと接する教員に向けて研修を実施しています。内容は教職員のニーズを把握し、学校や学年の課題を見立て、それに合った内容で行います。例えば、発達障害、虐待の対応について、自傷行為の心理などが挙げられます。こういった研修を実施することで、先生方に子どもたちをより深く理解していただくお手伝いをしています。先ほど自殺予防教育と申し上げましたが、愛知県臨床心理士会と名古屋市が一緒に作成した冊子を使用しています。名古屋市では心の SOS といい、全小中学校と一律の高校でこの冊子を活用して授業が実施されています。子どもたちが自分の心身の状態に気づき、どのような対処をすればよいかや、友達の SOS に気づき、大人につなげる方法やその大切さについて学びます。この冊子の裏面には相談先が複数紹介されており、どんな時にどこへ連絡すればよいのかが分かるようになっています。またこれとは別に解説書があり、指導案も掲載されています。その別冊には教職員へ向けた学校における自殺予防について詳しく書かれています。こちらは現場のスクールカウンセラーがオリジナルで作成した授業の資料と授業案です。中学校1年生に全員面談をする前にストレスについて学び、自分を見つめることで全員面談をよりスムーズに効果的に行えるようにと行っているものです。心の授業はチーム全体で作成したり実施するものもございますが、スクールカウンセラーがそれぞれ学校に合った授業を組み立てて行うこともしばしばあります。続いては苦戦している一部の子どもたちへの支援である二次的予防についてです。一時的予防活動を行う中で気づいた児童生徒の変化に対し、いち早く支援していきます。教職員から声をかけてもらったり、話を聞いてもらったりしますが、内容によっては教職員で対応しきれない場合もあれば、専門家として対応いたします。また、名古屋市では小学校4年生以上を対象に、学校生活アンケート、WebQU を実施しています。WebQU の結果を学校と共有し、孤独感や疎外感を抱えている児童生徒など、心配な状況をいち早くピックアップします。また、一時的予防のところでもお話しいたしましたが、全員面談は二次的予防も担っています。全員と面談することで、それほど顕在化していない問題にも気づくことがあり、早期対応につながっています。さらには、生活係会、教育相談部会、心の会議等、さまざまな校内会議に参加しています。そういった会議で、教員とは違う視点を持つ専門家として発言することで、子どもたちの多角的な理解を促進しています。最後は三次的予防です。問題を抱えた特定の子どもを対象としています。不登校やいじめ等、問題が表面化しているため、個別の面談等を行い、具体的な解決策を探っていきます。また、どうしても学校に来れない児童生徒については、教職員と家庭訪問をするなど、アウトリーチ型の支援も行っています。そして、校内の役割分担が必要であったり、外部の関係機関の協力が必要なケースについては、ケース会議を開催し、対応を検討し、役割分担を共通理解のもと行っていき、できる限り問題を重篤化することを防いだり、 解決に向け支援していきます。ケース会議の際は多職種で参加できるのも応援委員会の持ち味です。このように応援委員会常勤職員はさまざまな活動を行っていますが、一つ欠かせない会議がございます。それをチーム会議といい、ブロックの拠点となる事務局校にて毎週半日かけて実施しています。事務局校にブロックの職員が全員集まり、担当の主任も参加します。チーム会議では各学校の状況を報告したり、事象や他害などリスクの高いケースを報告したり、ケース検討を行ったりしています。また、各学校で行っている未然防止活動についても報告しています。このような会議を重ねることで、チーム支援の力を向上しています。個々の相談の流れについて少し詳しく見てみると、このようになります。さまざまな主訴や経緯で相談依頼があった後、情報を集め、その情報をもとにチーム等でアセスメントをしっかり行い、そのアセスメントをもとに具体的な対応を検討し、支援を行います。こちらはスクールカウンセラー、スクールソーシャルワーカーの1日のスケジュールの例です。中学校に1人ずついるスクールカウンセラーは校内での業務が中心となります。必要に応じて教職員と共有したり、コンサルテーションを行ったりする時間もとても大切です。スクールソーシャルワーカーはブロックに1、2名ですので、中学校 SC や小学校 SC からの依頼や学校からの依頼のもと、関係機関に出かけたり、家庭訪問に出かけたり、外での活動が多くなります。効果的に動くためにも、スクールカウンセラーとスクールソーシャルワーカーの連携は非常に重要になっています。このようにチームで常勤で活動している組織は全国的にも珍しいため、新しく採用される職員には育成の制度を充実させております。業務に関すること、公務員に関すること、関係機関に関することなどの新規採用者のための研修も多くありますし、年8回程度の新規採用者の会は、業務や学校文化に関する疑問が解消できるような仲間同士でサポートし合えるような会となっております。また、ブロック内でメンター制度を取ることもありますし、私たち主任総合援助職もサポートを心がけております。また、新規採用者だけではなく、すべての職員に対して年間10回以上の研修を開き、さらなるスキルアップを心がけております。以上をもちまして、私からの説明は終わらせていただきます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
川西さん、ありがとうございました。続きまして、ロサンゼルス統一学区カウンセリングコーディネーターのディクソン・ペレ博士と、バーミンガムコミュニティハイスクールカレッジカウンセラーのエリカ・ロペス氏からのお話を頂戴します。ディクソン・ペレ博士は2011年にロサンゼルス名古屋姉妹都市委員会のロサンゼルスと名古屋の学生交換プログラムの引率者であり、2011年から2022年まで学生交換プログラムのボランティア委員長をされておりました。名古屋に関わることが多かったことから、名古屋に対して愛着を持っておられるとのことです。一緒に登壇されるエリカ・ロペス氏は、バーミンガムコミュニティハイスクールにてカレッジカウンセラーをされています。エリカ氏も2015年のロサンゼルス名古屋姉妹都市委員会のロサンゼルスと名古屋の学生交換プログラムの引率者であり、ペレ博士と同じ学生交換プログラムのボランティアの委員長をされております。エリカ氏は2022年から現在にわたり委員長をしております。それではディクソン・ペレ博士、エリカ・ロペス氏、お願いいたします。ディクソン・ペレ博士、エリカ・ロペス氏に大きな拍手をお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, Nagoya. Hello.
Konnichiwa. Well, first of all, I want to take some time to acknowledge how honored we are to be here in front of you all, here in Japan, in Nagoya, in the city of Nagoya, and to present to you the status of school counseling in Los Angeles Unified School District. We hope the information that we share with you is appropriate and is informational and inspiring in some way, and an exchange of ideas between you and us. So I'm going to start by discussing the agenda of today. Okay, we are going to introduce a little bit more about ourselves so you can understand why we're here in front of you speaking to you. We're also going to do an inclusion activity, which is something that we do in the United States, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. We're also going to give an overview of LAUSD, or Los Angeles Unified School District, and the school counseling services that we provide to students. I will speak specifically about the role of a school counselor and what that looks like in LAUSD. And we're going to discuss in more detail about the multi-tier support model approach, so you can understand how that plays into the services that we provide. And we're also going to give a case study example between the collaboration between school counselors and mental health professionals, so you can see what that looks like more specifically, and then just some general ideas and takeaways from this presentation.
So, before we start getting into that heavy content, we want to make sure that you know who we are. First off, I am so happy to be here. I've been employed as a professional school counselor and a counseling team leader in LAUSD for 25 years. I have never given up on this profession, and I continue to have faith that school counseling saves lives. Nagoya is a very special place in my heart. LA and Nagoya are sister cities. I came in 2011 as a school counselor, and I chaperoned 4 students that were in high school named Ishmael, Pearl, Amanda, and Dalton. I returned 12 years later because I believe in the work that school counselors do. I was invited by the city of Nagoya because we are sister cities. When I received the invitation, I said yes. And I said yes because we are like family. We believe in communication, sharing of ideas, and supporting one another. I've done that for 12 years in supporting the Sister Cities program. And I love being a school counselor. My professor told me that you entered this profession because it's a calling. I believe it's my life's work. I have many counselors and mentors that have encouraged me, and encouraged me with the gift of kindness, patience, care, and support to do the work that I do today. So if you are new to this profession, welcome. It is a calling, and you are here for a purpose, to learn, to grow, and if you are currently in the profession, I want you to be inspired, because there's a lot of work to do. Erica?
Likewise, just like Dr. Bray mentioned, I too was a chaperone for the Lanska Sister City Affiliation Student Exchange Program. And I got to experience the generosity, the kindness, and the vitality of Nagoya and its residents. And I fell in love with the city. I also volunteered for the Sister City Association affiliation for this reason, because I love to be connected to Nagoya. So when I had the opportunity to come to present to you all, I was honored. I was honored because, like Dixon mentioned, this is a calling, and it is a profession that has a lot of rewards that you see in students. And by affecting our students and helping our students. We're making a difference in the futures of students, not just in their immediate student, but their families and their future families. To me, education is very, very important. It opened up a lot of doors and experiences, like to be able to be here in front of you all. So I am honored to be here. Thank you. So we want to start our presentation, much like how we start our presentations and lessons in our schools with students. We often have what's called an inclusion activity. And an inclusion activity is to help students or participants feel comfortable in participating in the presentation, to be able to ask questions, to feel a part of the lesson. And so today we're going to highlight one activity called pair share. Okay? Pair share, what it entails is usually you find a partner. We call them your elbow partner because it's the person next to you, the closest to your elbow. And you are provided a question or a prompt. Okay? And in this, you designate a partner A and a partner B. Partner B speaks about the question for about 30 seconds, and then they switch to partner A to speak about the question for 30 seconds. And usually we share with everybody else, take turns, volunteer. So we're going to do that today. And the question we're going to pose is you get to choose from two questions. What is your why? We shared with you why we're here. We want to know what is your why? Why are you here? Or why are you in your profession? Or you can talk about what you hope to learn or walk away with today from this forum. Okay? So we will give you about 30 seconds. So with the person next to you, you decide who's partner A and partner B. And it's okay if it gets a little loud. So we'll start now. So start with your partner, answer one of these questions.
You could talk to one another.
Yes. Okay, switch to the next partner to share. So switch. Okay, so if I have your attention in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so this is what usually happens, is that students might be a little reluctant to share, but then they start talking and they get carried away in the conversation. And we encourage that. We want them to feel comfortable in the presentation. Usually we would have volunteers to share out what they talked about with their partner, but because of time, we won't be able to do that. And then we end this activity by saying thank you, or arigatou gozaimasu, to your partner. So thank you for participating. Now, Dixon will be going over the overview of LUSD school counseling and the services that are provided.
Thank you, Erica. So, as I mentioned, we come a long distance. We are part of the Sister Cities program, and I represent Los Angeles Unified as one of many workers in the organization. I am very proud to had the opportunity to work for that organization for 25 years. And in this organization, Los Angeles Unified, it is the second largest school district in the nation. Within the district, there are 4 different areas called regions: north, south, east, and west. And it's separated to give individualized supports to the different communities in that area. There's one central office. I work in the central office to support all of the different schools in LAUSD. There are over 1,000 schools and 400,000 students. In LAUSD, relevant to this presentation, I want to highlight that we have 24 wellness centers operated by district medical and mental health staff. These are separate from school counselors. School counselors refer students for Tier 3 services to these organizations. Additionally, on-site we have 21 school-based health centers, which are on-campus clinics that provide services directly to students and families that need the support. When we look at the enrollment screen on the next slide, you see the total enrollment in LAUSD. Individual school enrollment varies in all of the different 1,000 school sites. For elementary schools, some schools could have fewer than 200 and as much as 1,100 pupils. In middle school, which are grades 6, 7, and 8, could have up to 1,800 students, and high schools could have more than 2,500 students. However, most schools try to average lower enrollment for more individualized attention. On this next slide, you see that LAUSD is diverse. And there are 9 categories listed here as the 9 largest in LAUSD, topping out with Latino Hispanic students as the majority of students that are served in Los Angeles Unified. As of fall of 2022, English and 97 additional languages are spoken in LA Unified. And 86,000 students are learning to speak English proficiently. Erica will give you an overview on some of the different counselors that are major groupings, as well as support services like and specialized services like school psychologists, and we'll give details on that.
So given that we have so many students in our district, you can imagine that there is a big need to provide support services to our students. We have over 100 different certificated roles in LAUSD, and it ranges everything from teachers to counselors, psychologists, social workers, assistant principals, and so all of these members make up the support team. Particularly, I'm going to talk about the student support program around school counseling, and particularly in high school. Okay? In high school, generally you will find that there are secondary school counselors, and every student in that high school is assigned to a particular school counselor, and they have a caseload. And school counselors provide universal and targeted services, and they provide services around academic, social emotional, as well as college and career counseling. Then we have pupil services and attendance counselors. And these counselors, also known as PSAs are specialized in working with students that are having issues with attendance. They work with the families, they work with the students, and they also work with the school to create an inviting and engaging environment for students to want to come to school. Then we have psychiatric social workers, or PSWs. And PSWs provide much more targeted and intensive interventions. And these are services around mental health and social emotional problems. So that's what they particularly focus and specialize in. Okay? And then we have school psychologists. So school psychologists focus on evaluating and assessing students to determine if they qualify for certain accommodations and certain services, such as those provided through special education. And then lastly, we have our administration, which is usually particularly done by the assistant principal of the school, and they oversee secondary school counseling. And they are the leaders, and they help guide the team to ensure that services are being provided and meeting the goals of the school.
So now that you have a general overview, there's always a vision, there's always a mission, there's always something that guides the work that a district needs in order to find results. And as a result of having administrators take a look at our data, we had as a district a vision called the strategic plan. And the timing was very purposeful. It came at the heels of a 100-day plan report that coincided with a plan from the state that looked at budgets, that looked at the way resources were calculated. And this vision was approved by our Board of Education in June 21st, 2022. And what the idea is with this plan is to create coherence among all of the services, including school counseling, as part of making sure that all students are served. When you look at this chart, in dark blue, you see this idea of pillars. And pillars are considered focus areas. In light blue, you see priorities. And priorities is how will we support these ideas to come alive? Strategies are in dark green, and those are actions that we take in order to meet all of the focus areas and how we support them. And the metrics are in light green. And that's how we measure whether or not we have delivered on the services we promise to our students and our families. And in this next slide, on this chart, you see 5 pillars. And all 5 pillars, all of the different colors, contain priorities. For school counseling, you'll see highlighted in very thin yellow boxes. You will see these are directly aligned to school counseling. Of particular interest to school counseling is college and career readiness, strong social emotional skills, strong relationships, and data-driven decision-making. When we look at this additional chart, we look at how we decide whether or not we're meeting measures of success. Graduation is an important key because they start as young students and they have a goal, they have a dream, they have a vision to get a high school diploma. We wish that 100% of our students graduate. But to get there, school counselors are asked to do a lot of work. And one of the things that each counselor is asked to do in high school is to as well as middle school, is to have 100% completion of a one-on-one conference with each and every student every year. That is the ask, and that's the expectation in LAUSD. So, how do we measure whether or not we are getting results? There are multiple ways, but one highlight that we have here is a district measurement called the School Experience Survey, and it's an annual survey that is given to teachers, to staff, including counselors, to students, and to parents. And we look to see academic, school climate, and a social emotional learning as targets. So, are students feeling safe at school? Are students finding that they could do their homework and feel proud of it? Are they finding that teachers are listening to them? Are they finding that their counselors are providing services and counseling activities? So all of this data is given to everyone, and I will give a case example later on in the presentation to show you how counseling teams look at this data to inform how we get results. Erica?
Thank you. So, in addition to districts providing guidance to how school counseling programs are run and implemented, we also look to outside organizations that provide guidance and standards and provide information to counselors to the ideal of what a school counseling program should be. One of them is the American School Counselor Association, or it's shortly called ASCA. And ASCA is a national association that equips counselors with information, with standards, with opportunities to learn and to grow as counselors. We also have a California Association of School Counselors, which is particularly for California. And they also provide standards, but more taking into consideration policy and expectations from California. They also provide advocacy, so they advocate on the behalf of counselors both at the state level and at the national level. And so these associations provide a lot of publications, a lot of research to inform school counseling programs. In particular, the ASCA has a national model, and it's now in its 4th edition. And this model provides specific indicators, specific standards that should be implemented for a successful school counseling program. And what their model entails is that assessment, like Dr. Pere mentioned, it's important to assess your students, assess the environment of the school, to inform and define specifically what needs to be done or what interventions need to be implemented. And then those will inform how you manage things and how you deliver these services. And likewise, those feed into how the results of an assessment will show up, right? So it's a lot of interacting pieces shown by this diagram here, okay? Also, the national model talks about specific types of counseling that should be provided by school counselors. As Dixon mentioned, these are taken into consideration by the districts, by the schools to implement their programs. And so you'll see academic counseling at the forefront. You'll also see college and career counseling, as well as social emotional counseling. And that is taken into consideration when thinking about what services to provide for students. And this is taken into account with the multi-tier support services model, which we'll dive into a little bit more to guide how specifically these programs are given to all students, some students, and particular populations. Okay? So for ASCA, their standards are very specific. These are samples of some of the indicators that schools' counseling programs can use to inform their decisions. For instance, in the academic sector, we have an indicator of making sure that there's academic planning towards graduation, right? And ensuring that students are graduating from high school. We have another indicator that promotes rigorous coursework, right? Is the level of coursework that's provided by teachers appropriate and preparing students for life after high school? In the post-secondary realm, we have indicators such as providing personalized counseling and guidance in choosing college or careers that they want to go into after they graduate. Another indicator is about informing students and parents about the requirements of going on to college, the requirements about getting financial aid to be able to attend college, as well as providing lessons and workshops. Again, these are specific indicators that will inform how you build your school counseling program. And under the social emotional bracket, we have indicators that we want to implement that students get appropriate social emotional learning lessons from the school counselors to be better human beings. And so these are just a few examples. There's many more. There's a whole book that provides different standards and indicators. But what that looks like in school counseling programs is that the district provides professional development to help assist school counselors to implement these services. Some of the professional development that the school counselors receive, it may look like something like this, and I'll give you some examples. Some of them will include learning about the multi-tier support services. Also, we have learning about how to monitor graduation progress so that you can find students that might be falling behind or need specific interventions. We also have students professional development around individual graduation planning, right? How to plan a specific graduation trajectory for a student. Also, policy updates. There's oftentimes changes in policy or regulations and updating the counselors so they're up to date with all of that. In the post-secondary realm, we have career technical education pathways that we offer for students and learning and knowing about those so that we can provide information to students. We also have monitoring systems for students to make sure that they get federal financial aid to be able to afford and attend college. And then under social emotional, some of the professional development that we receive is crisis intervention. We get psychological first aid, which is to help students. We get professional development on suicide prevention, which is very important, and this is a yearly thing. Every year, every person gets professional development around this. We also get professional development on bullying, building community, and substance abuse, just to name a couple of them.
So the reason why we talk about the big picture is that if you don't have a vision, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a framework, you don't know where you're going. So we share this information because if you don't have a plan, then it would be hard to assess whether or not you're being effective. And we also have California standards. And these are things that help us drive our work. And it was established many years ago, but updated as recent of October 2023. And it's highly aligned with a new bill from our legislation asking for school counselors to ensure that we are implementing mental health services and supports, as well as the multi-tiered student support services. Similar to what you've already heard about the national model is what California asked LAUSD to consider in planning. So the vision is that all counselors are trained, all counselors become leaders, they have a plan, that they're ethical. If they hear something they're going to do something about it. If they hear that a student wants to hurt themselves, they work immediately to have a plan in place to support that student. We also have, as Erica mentioned, ongoing training. I am part of the team that does monthly training for close to 1,000 counselors in LAUSD. That's a lot of meetings every year with a lot of discussions, because counselors need support that are ongoing. And we know that with this standard of building counseling capacity, that if we're not doing things right, we change. Because just because we thought that it was right one way, doesn't mean that we forever stay in our ways. We reflect and review how we can make things better in our system. This next standard is really quick. It talks on 3 elements of how school counselors prioritize mental health. On this next slide, you see examples of the indicators of how school counselors would go into classrooms to deliver lessons. And they could be on a variety of topics, which could include making and keeping friends, or it could be academic in nature, like time management, or how to take a test effectively, or how you could get over test anxiety, how you could relax effectively outside of school. Those are some topics that we use to promote mental health. Triage services and coordination is also part of this idea of Standard 2. When we go to Standard 4, you see this model. We've talked about it over and over and over again. But visually, what you see here is every student at a school is expected to get Tier 1 services. And every school does it differently, but as a district, we give suggestions and best practices. The person that is in charge of making sure that services are delivered to all students is the school principal. And he or she asks that their school counseling team is accountable to ensuring that classroom instruction, parent education, school-wide programming, and universal screening happens for all. And that looks different at every campus. When you go up to Tier 2, that could look like individual counseling based off students saying, I need help. Or a teacher coming to a counselor saying, I'm having trouble with this student. Can you check up on them because they seem to be withdrawn or crying or having relationship issues? When we get to Tier 3, you see a very small population of students up there. That's where intensive plans and support services are necessary. It's a smaller population, however, it takes a lot of time and energy to deliver these services. So what's key in a program is to deliver services at all levels. But if you have a strong foundation in Tier 1, the hope is you have less people in Tier 3 and Tier 2. But we know that high school students, elementary school students, middle school students are humans, learning and growing. So you can't predict who's going to be level 1, 2, or 3. You have to ask the questions. And that's by getting to know each and every one of them. When we talk about Standard 5, the rule of thumb that's given from California is 80% of the time is one-on-one or group interactions with student to counselor. 80% of their time for a full-time position in LAUSD is asked that they are delivering face-to-face conferences, getting in the classroom, delivering lessons, or working with groups of students. 20% of the time is in meetings, is in consultation, and doing other planning to help support students. That's the rule of thumb. And lastly, we look at how do we make schools safe. These are all the ingredients, all the little pieces of the puzzle that are the big picture. Now let's get into learning more about what a counselor would do at a school, and then we'll take you through a case example in the next 25 minutes.
So the role of a school counselor is important to understand what is it that we do, right? So our role is really to lead, to advocate, and to collaborate to promote equity and access. And that is something that is at our core of the teachings that we receive, the training that we receive for being a counselor, is equity and access. How are services, academic lessons, education being provided to students, and it being equitable and accessible to all students, right? It doesn't matter what level they are at or where their starting point is. And through this, we look at it and ensuring that, again, that there's academic support, there's college and career guidance, and social emotional needs. We're trying to move away from the historical view of school counselors as just somebody that schedules students into classes. That was the way school counseling was viewed in the past. And now there's a movement to be able to provide more counseling that prepares students for life after high school, to be successful citizens of the United States or of the world. Also, we serve as liaisons and sometimes as mediators between students, teachers, and parents. And in this way, we have to understand all the moving parts of a school to be able to have this role. Also, in our daily responsibilities, it might look like something implementing an activity or a program or lessons. We advocate for the high academic achievement, so we are in many meetings where we are ensuring that students are receiving the level of education they need to be prepared for life after high school. We also produce interventions and strategies school-wide, always taking into consideration counseling services. And again, we provide consultation and training for staff. In addition to training and giving lessons to students, we train staff as well, right? Because every staff members, including teachers, come with different views, and we want to make sure that people are informed. To be a school counselor, the requirement minimum is to have a 4-year bachelor's degree. It does not matter what that bachelor's degree is in. We have counselors that are psychology majors, they might be history majors, or there's economic majors, and they study that for their bachelor's degree. However, the training to become a school counselor really comes in place when they go on to get their pupil personnel services credential. This is a credential program that is supervised by the state educational board. They are the ones that designate what needs to be completed in order to receive a credential that allows you to work with students. And in these programs, there are practicum and fieldwork requirements, and it must be in an educational setting. Additionally, the majority of school counselors, even though it's not required, do go on to get a master's degree. And many universities combine the PPS, or the Pupil Personnel Services credential, along with the master's program, and the master's is in school counseling. And here they learn about theory, they learn about restorative justice, and different practices that can be implemented at the school. And in the Pupil Personnel Services credential, the specific requirements for fieldwork and practicum are listed here. They have to have a minimum of 100 hours of practica, which is within the university, before they go out to the field work. So this is practice within themselves, or doing some types of case studies before they go out to the field. And then they need 800 hours, clock hours, of working in 2 out of 3 school settings. And the settings include elementary, junior high school, and high school, right? So any of those 3 can be chosen, total of 800 hours. And the field work must include a minimum of 100 hours in social emotional counseling, career counseling, and academic counseling. So we can't be putting people just to file or bring coffee. So it has to be specific counseling practica. The school site, how it will look for a counselor is we help students with their academic planning. So we will sit with them, see what their goals are after they graduate, make a plan. We help them create goals of what they want to do. We teach them in the classroom by providing school counseling lessons, many that Dixon already mentioned. We provide short-term counseling, and if a student needs long-term counseling or therapy, we refer out so that students can receive these services. We also initiate parent conferences, many parent conferences, again, because we are the liaisons between teachers and students and parents. We also lead wellness activities. There's campaigns, posters, things that we do during lunchtime to promote wellness and mental health. We also have team meetings that we discuss and cases, and we consult with other counselors as well. And again, always advocating for equity and access. How is these services equitable and access for all students? And now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the multi-tiered support services that are provided for students. And this is a framework that was designed specifically to address how students receive social, emotional, academic, and college and career services. Specifically, like Dixon already went over, most students will get services. Then there's tier 2, where some students, and then tier 3, few students will get these services. And the framework is grounded in data. Data is very, very important. Data from the students, indicators that will provide guidance for the framework of how these services are going to be provided. Okay, so some examples, for instance, tier 1 might include 9th grade orientation. Transitioning from junior high school to high school can be a very difficult time. So we can provide orientation where students get shown around the school, they meet students that are already in their 2nd or 3rd or 4th year of high school, to create connections, to feel comfortable in coming into a new environment. We also have college workshops that are open to everybody, so that students can learn about how to get into college. It can also include classroom lessons, school counseling. It can also include the individual graduation plans that every student must have in order to plan for graduation. And tier 2, this again is short-term counseling. This is for specific students that might be having issues, maybe dealing with anxiety around testing. Maybe they had a breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you need to address that. Again, short-term counseling, as well as monitoring. Keeping a close eye on specific students that just need that extra consideration, depending on the issues that they're dealing with. We also do small group counseling, which is usually around a topic, and these are students that are either referred or pinpointed based on the data that is provided by the school. And then we have intensive services, which is one-on-one counseling, as well as emergency and crisis prevention, and we always refer to resources to do the more long-term type of therapy and counseling. And now we're going to go on to a case study that Dr. Perret will go over.
So, imagine you are at a school as a school counselor and you are brought onto the team. what we're wanting to do is illustrate for all of you what it looks like to have collaboration as a team and with other providers. So, when we look at this model here, we see that on the far left-hand side is the different roles that would be comprised of staffing at a school that would be on the school counseling team. You see here that there are a number of different titles: school counselor, college counselor, psychiatric social worker, PSA, which is what we talked about earlier regarding attendance, an A through G counselor who talks about college-specific interventions, and school psychologists who works particularly with testing. For this case example, the school decided to purchase more counseling time as part of their team based off their budget. In LAUSD, you get a certain allotment of counselors that you have at your school. But the school principal and the school committee that advised the principal decided that they wanted to put more time and energy to bring more counselors so that additional services are provided. On the far right-hand corner, you will see that there are many different divisions that help support the training and the policies for school counselors, for psychiatric social workers, and school psychologists. Each one has a different body that they report to and are organized. We said earlier that school counselors are given a caseload of students in high school and in middle school. So every single student has an identified counselor. If I were a school principal and I looked at my students, I would want to make sure that I would lower the caseload of the student to counselor ratio so I could get better outcomes. But this is what it would look like for a campus that would have about 900 students. Erica works at a campus with 17 counselors at a high school. However, there are 3,200 students at our school. So this is just a visual aid of what a counseling team would be. On the next slide, I talked to you about the data that is collected. And as I mentioned before, on the next slide, or let me say this, on the next page in your book, because we're having technical difficulties right now, there is a slide that's called Sample Team Data Analysis, Self-Efficacy. And what you'll see on your book is that a counseling team looks at the data that is given as a survey to students. And again, students speak the truth whenever they're given the opportunity to do so. And what this data tells us in your book is that self-efficacy for this school seemed to be a concern because 50% of the students at that school consistently over the year felt like they could not achieve good grades on carrying out a task or carrying out a homework project or delivering good grades on a test. So as a counseling team and working with teachers, They looked at what students said about themselves, and they analyzed what are the areas of need. So that's one way that data is collected. That's another way that it's analyzed. But there are so many other ways to look at how students are performing. It could be grades, it could be attendance, it could be different measures that we get data from to figure out how we would approach improving our students' success. On the next slide, you see that there are goals that a team would put together based off this idea. Well, students are saying that they don't believe that they could do well on tests, or they don't see themselves as being able to master every topic that the teacher is delivering. So, as a school-wide effort, we would hope that on this survey, 60% would agree that they are finding growth and achievement. While I wish that it would be 100%, you take incremental growth. Hopefully, you would see more students in the blue than in any other color. So, the plan that was developed to achieve higher results in self-efficacy would be making sure staff is getting training, that there's a sequential plan with advisory, that there is peer mentoring, where counselors train students to be listeners just like counselors, and involving all stakeholders, which means looking at the plan and inviting parents to give feedback around it. We go back to the Ask the National model. This is some of the supports that we get in trying to align what standards could we pick from this menu to ground ourselves in making sure that self-management skills and the ability to identify and overcome barriers is a target goal that the school counselor is aligning to this idea of self-efficacy. On this next slide, you talk about Tier 1 services. Counselors go in and support advisories and deliver classroom lessons and presentations, and they work with teachers to ensure that some of the concepts around self-efficacy, like how to say positive statements to yourself, and giving them chances to do that with one another in class is important. So you see here on the right-hand side, it's planned activities. It's for targeted students, which could be for all or targeted. It focuses on community building and collaboration between teachers and counselors. That's one approach for Tier 1 service. When we go to the next slide, you look specifically at what school counselors would deliver in academics. So for 9th grade all the way to 12th grade, there is a program that we use called Naviance, which is an online learning tool where you can deliver lessons based off completing goals, looking at college search, and building the goals year by year, understanding how to create a resume. So what this does is it enables a student to think about a plan that's long-term and have more one-on-one time with a counselor, because if they do these activities, it would give them something to talk about. And if they do the activities with honesty, then hopefully that builds relationships. So when you look at this model, it's over time. It's giving students more ways to have a conversation with a counselor, and it builds this idea that it's a safe activity. But safe activities are important for counseling because sometimes those safe activities build connection. And then when you have connection, then you really find out what's going on with students. So that's why we focus on Tier 1, so that it builds this idea of building a community so that if there are problems, it'll be later shared. This next slide talks about what it would be for Tier 2 services. And Tier 2 services is looking at particular smaller group of students that either self-identify or are referred by a teacher or referred by a parent to get additional help. One thing that some schools do in LAUSD are this idea of groups. For this counseling team, for this case study, they used the ASTA targeted standards of trying to help students identify and overcome barriers. And the goal on the right-hand side is students will be able to define growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So, for a small group of students that are identified, they would have 8 sessions on specific lessons that are in a small group to talk about how to transform negative self-talk, identifying perfectionism, how to get over test anxiety, and a meaningful way to have connection with other students, with a counselor, and at the end, finish a thing that they get a certificate for. So that is one example. When we look at the next slide, it takes planning. There are different stages in order for Tier 2 services to be delivered. So these could be planned as a team or as an individual. But what's important is that you have parent consent, that these type of services are delivered, that you have objectives, and you test students before they start, and you test them after. And we're not talking about psychological testing. We're just asking them, how were they feeling before they attended the group, and how are they feeling after? Very simple. It's not too evaluative. It doesn't need any psychological analysis. It just needs appropriate listening skills and facilitation skills to build a community. When we look at Tier 2 agreements and handout, these are sample ideas of what expectations you could have in delivering Tier 2 services to students. And this could be a handout on one way to do goal setting. When we talk about collaborative service, we talk about partnering with other members of the team. And the PSW is a very important person that school counselors work with. If the school is privileged enough to decide to purchase time for a PSW. Luckily, the school that is a case study we've shown indicates that this school had money to purchase this individual who did focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 services. And we want to talk really clearly about what happens for Tier 2 and Tier 3 services, particularly on the topic of suicide. Now, we know that suicide in Japan and in Los Angeles is an area of concern. We have policy in place that safeguards students, that is very explicit And the reason why it's explicit is because it's part of the California law to have a very clear policy as a school district to address populations that need to be considered, and that training is the foundation of making sure everyone is responsible for identifying warning signs, risk factors, and prevention. Just in LA County alone, public health data stated that that suicide is the third leading cause of death among youth ages 10 through 24. And 102 youth suicides have taken place. This is all of LA County, but it's alarming because one death is too many deaths. So that's why the state had mandated that everyone is trained to ensure that everyone identifies warning signs. Protective factors are this idea to ensure that suicide training is consistent. And here's the reason why. In 2021, there was a survey conducted by the national government, and LAUSD students reported that 42% of high school students reported a prolonged sense of sadness or hopelessness every day for 2 or more continuous weeks. 22% of middle school students and 18% of high school students seriously considered attempting suicide. Over 9% of middle school and 10% of high school students attempted suicide. So we understand that this is an issue that's near and dear to both Nagoya and LA, but psychoeducation is a key element in creating a campaign of awareness. So we have training for our counselors to do protocol to identify students that are high, medium, and low risk. And we have a number of different handouts that you have as part of this presentation that you could review later that will help parents and staff members understand how to have difficult conversations around this idea of suicide. And quickly, because I know I'm running out of time, here's a case example of what a psychiatric social worker's efforts are, since that person was required at this school to report out their findings. On the left, you see the top 5 issues, which include suicide ideation. And let me be very clear. Just because it's reported that suicide behavioral ideation is a concern is a good thing. Let me repeat. I say it's a good thing because they're talking about the issue. They're not keeping it a secret. We know that many times students feel isolated, but because we had a large counseling team in this case study, they were able to have different points of confidence to talk to a trusted counselor or a person on the counseling team. So just because it's reported this way means that it's identified and appropriate services could be delivered. If I looked at data reported on my district platform and I saw 0 suicide ideation, I would be concerned. That means counselors are not delivering services. Counselors are not talking to their students. Because the statistics are very alarming, and they're pointing that no one is talking to them. So this is a case example of how this data gets reported to a school. And the last slide, we'll talk about all of the different risk factors that may take place. And again, suicide assessment is just that. It's an assessment. Luckily, it's not a death. it's saving lives. So to end, Erica will
So this is a lot of information, a lot of different words, ideas, services at different levels were shared. And so we would like to end with some of the things that we'd like for you to take away with you as we complete the presentation. And one of them is that school counseling and mental health services are for all students, right? That's why in Los Angeles we do spend a lot of time on Tier 1 services. We want to make sure we're educating everybody in the school environment. Also, we want to make sure that you consider culturally sensitive multi-factor approaches when you're addressing counseling services. Again, that's the emphasis on the equity and access. How are these services serving everyone? Are there barriers that are preventing students from having access to these services? Also, we want to have a takeaway of reducing mental health stigma. There's many factors that go into why people don't want to get services. The ideas might be culturally, historical, from families. So understanding that, taking away that idea that it's a bad thing, so that students feel comfortable talking to an adult, be it a counselor, a teacher, or anybody adult that's on school. Also distributing the responsibility to safeguard students with all adults, right? The more people that are trained to be able to identify, to be able to refer students to these services, the more instances that we'll have to be able to provide those interventions. And there's a saying that we use in the United States, and it takes a village to raise a child. It's never just one person, it takes a village. And the community, school community is a village. Also, we want you to focus on psychoeducation for the school community, both at Tier 2 and Tier 3 concerns, so that everybody is informed about those services and to be able to identify students. We also have many resources. I'm not going to go over all of them. They will be provided if you request a digital copy of the presentation. These are all links that you can click on that we refer to in our presentation, and they have much more detailed information about the services that we've provided through the school. So many services and resources for you. We thank you so much for your time. We hope this informed you or provided some new information for you to consider in your own school counseling programs. And arigatou gozaimashita.
最後にお時間を設けたいと思います。ディクソン・ペレイ博士、エリカ・ロペス氏、貴重なお話をありがとうございました。では、第2部を開始したいと思います。第2部は第1部で登壇してくださった LA のお二方と名古屋子ども応援委員会の職員がロサンゼルスでの実践と子ども応援委員会の取り組みについて議論を深めてまいります。最後には質問コーナーもございます。申し込みの際に質問をお受けいたしましたので、お時間の許す限り質問させていただこうと思います。それでは第2部の登壇者の方々をご紹介いたします。名古屋子ども委員会の職員です。名古屋子ども応援委員会主任総合援助職篠田真紀さん。名古屋子ども応援委員会スクールカウンセラー中野正史さん。名古屋子ども応援委員会スクールカウンセラー松尾真由子さん。名古屋子ども応援委員会スクールソーシャルワーカー林佳代さん。第1部にてご講演をいただきました ロサンゼルス統一学区カウンセリングコーディネーターディクソン・ペレイ博士、バーミンガムコミュニティハイスクールカレッジカウンセラーエリカ・ロペス様、以上の方々でございます。それでは早速、名古屋子ども応援委員会職員の篠田さん、ロサンゼルスの取り組みについてどのように思われましたでしょうか。
ディクソン博士、エリカさん、貴重なお話、今日はありがとうございました。お話を聞いていまして、アメリカと日本の国の成り立ちや文化の違いは背景にはありますが、医師の仕事に仕事内容に少し違うところもあるかなと思った一方で、共通点も多くあったように感じています。ディクソン博士とエリカさんのスライドの20、27、37にありました多層的なサポートというのは、名古屋が行っている3つの予防の段階と非常によく似ていて、同じ枠組みで支援をしているんだなということを感じました。先ほどの川岸の話にもありましたが、日本のスクールカウンセラーはこれまで非常勤という形が中心で、すでに起こっている問題に対処するという、ティア3の支援を中心にやってきていますが、名古屋は SC が常勤化したことで支援する時間が長くなっていて、すでに起きてしまっている問題の対処だけではなくって、問題を未然に防ぐ支援にも力が入れられるようになってきています。そこでお聞きしたいことがあります。スライドの方で出ていたティア1のところなんですけども、私たちこれからそこの方に力を入れて問題を未然に防いでいきたいなというふうに考えているんですけども、ロサンゼルスの方ではこのティア1からティア3のところ、どのようなバランスというか、どのような比率で、業務が行われているのかということと、その変化が、情勢によって変化してきているのかということをお聞かせいただければありがたいです。
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to speak from the experience of the schools that I've worked at, and overall in the schools I've worked at, counselors spend about 75% of their time doing Tier 1 services, and about 25%, a little bit less, doing Tier 3 services. And that is because it speaks to that we're advocates, right? We're advocates to our students. We spoke about that every student has a school counselor that is assigned to them. And so we are responsible for our caseload as a whole. And because of that, Tier 1 services are integral part of the school counseling program because it's preventative in nature. It'll help to either bring down the number of students that need Tier 3 services or mitigate it in some instances. And that is vital to the program. But we also understand that students come to us with different experiences in life, different traumas, different academic levels, depending maybe of the schools that they attended before attending our high school. So there's always going to be a need for Tier 3, but these programs that are done for Tier 1 are very helpful to bring down that number so we can service all students.
はい、ペレ博士、お聞かせ願います。
Thank you for the question. And similar to what Erica-san said, I would agree that Tier 1 services, just like what the national and the state models ask for our standards, is that I really want to go more into direct services versus indirect services, because if 80% of the time is delivering direct services, the tiers will come naturally, because there might be some weeks where all focus will be Tier 3, because there's an accident that happens that's catastrophic in the community that requires attention for 1 week straight, all Tier 3 services, all hands on deck. So there are other times throughout the school year it's happy, everyone is enjoying life. And then more Tier 1 services, maybe a couple of Tier 2 services will be delivered. So I don't want to focus so much on the delivery of time on Tier 1, 2, and 3, but whether or not direct services are actually being implemented on a consistent, constant basis. If the counselor is sitting in their office empty, then that means they're not delivering services. If they're not in the classroom, they're not delivering services. So I do like the question, but if you focus more time in doing direct services, you're going to get better outcomes. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。では続きまして中野さんお願いいたします。
はい、よろしくお願いします。私もですね、今の話に続いてですが、日本の非常勤スクールカウンセラーをはじめ、常勤化されても個別面接、個別カウンセリングっていうのは非常に重要で、それはどの方もされているのは間違いないと思っております。ただ今常勤化して、ティア1の部分ですね、心理教育とか、いろんな形で、心の教室とか教育とか、そういった活動をしているんですけれども、あるいは、日本では多くの仕事がですね、教育相談という形で学校の教員がされているんですよね。でもそういうようなところでいろんなデータも出てくるんですけれども、そのいわゆるティア1で得られたようなデータや指標を、うまくティア2やティア3につなげきれてないなっていうところがちょっと思ってるんです。でアメリカの中で、特にロスですねの中で、ティア1で得られたデータや指標をティア2やティア3、特に個別カウンセリング、それより深刻なものに至るのを防ぐために個別面接につなげるような、何か、特別な工夫ですね。例えば、あなたはティア1でこういう状況だったのでティア2の個別カウンセリングを受けてくださいねっていう、それを受けないと何かの単位が取得できませんよっていうような、ある意味の強制力、あるいはその他の効果的な、仕組み、そういったものがあるのか、あるいはないならば誰がどのように働きかけて見えるのかということを伺いたいなというふうに思っております。よろしくお願いします。
ではエリカ様お願いいたします。
ありがとうございます。For the question, yes, transitioning students to more intensive support services, going from one tier to the other, can be a difficult topic for a lot of families and students and parents in particular, and sometimes they can be resistant to that. Instead of taking an authoritative approach to going into different tiers, we really do take more of an educational approach, right? We learn how to communicate with parents, with students, educating them depending on the topic so that we can take away that stigma from how they feel about these services, and they're more open to accepting Tier 2 and Tier 3 services. And it does depend on the severity of the issue. Obviously, if a student is harming themselves or in danger of harming others, then we must inform the parents, and much more drastic interventions need to be taken. But in general, if it's something that is not as high risk, we can meet with students and provide these services, 1 to 2 or 3 meetings. Once it goes for much longer, then we do have to inform parents, and then that's when we have to educate. And that's one of the things that we were talking about in the takeaways, is that it's important to start these conversations about stigma, about psychoeducation for all, so that when it does come up, there isn't that hesitation or resistance.
はい、手で拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you so much for the question. I'm hoping that I understand it, so please forgive me if I don't get the nuances correct. I want to be very clear. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, this model, that's for adults. We understand it. The kids don't need to understand it because the kids are just living. They're just being kids. It's a model for us as academic professionals who understand how to deliver services. So I will tell you, there are many Tier 3 students that are some of the most brilliant students that I have ever worked with. There are some students that just have a psychotic breakdown. They have trauma, and it's discovered, and they get serviced. Maybe sometimes they go to a hospital because they need treatment. But that's the beautiful gift of our work. Because if we are able to help provide the services, then they could access the opportunities to have a sustainable life. A life beyond their wildest imaginations. I could tell you an example. I had a student who had a breakdown because she had a lot of ACEs, adverse trauma from childhood. And they manifested in her 11th grade year. I had to go into ambulance with her because she was requiring intensive services. I visited her, and luckily I had good relations with the mother. But when she re-entered back into the school, we have protocols in place that are not punitive. We say, welcome back. We want you back in school. How can we help you? We have specific policies that talk about how students should be served. So she reintegrated back. We built up her friend base, and she earned confidence because she was getting medication, she was getting support, she had friends, and she believed in something different. She ended up going on to school and finishing a degree in law, and she's a practicing lawyer. So that's just one of many stories I could tell. Many stories of students that had a hard time in high school but are living successful lives today. So don't get caught up. If you're Tier 3, you're bad. That's not what I want you to take away. I want you to figure out, okay, they're Tier 3, how can we better serve them to be the best human beings possible? Thank you.
ありがとうございます。では、松尾さん、お願いいたします。よ
ろしくお願いいたします。子ども委員会としても、全ての子どもたちに対して予防っていう観点を大切にしているという話が今まであったかと思うんですが、その中で予防という意味で、どのように集団の状態ですとか、ニーズや課題をですとか潜在しているリスクですね、そういったものをどういうふうに理解し、把握し、予防として有効な内容や方法ですね、そういったものをどんなふうに選択しているのかなということを疑問に思ってお話聞かせていただいていたんですけれども、データを非常に大事にされているということで、そういったものに基づいて していただいているという理解で、はい、よろしいでしょうか。はい、あとはその、集団ですとかある程度の大きさのグループに対して支援を行うということがあると思うんですけれども、そこにいる子どもたちっていうのは非常に多様な子どもたちがいらっしゃるかなと思ってまして、その文化であったりですとか用いている言語であったりですとか、例えばその特別な教育的なニーズであったり生活環境であったり今まで生きてくる中でしてきた体験だったり、そういった多様性を持っているその子どもたちの集団に対して支援を行うときに何か配慮されていること、どんなふうに配慮されているかっていうのを教えていただけたらと思います。お願いいたします。
ではエリカ様お願いいたします。
So I'm going to speak from my specific role as a college counselor. My role is a little different. It's more specialized in nature because my role as a college counselor in the high school that I work at is to provide students with assistance through the process of going to college specifically. That's where my specialty is and my expertise. And so I help students with everything from selecting to go to university, to selecting which universities they want to apply to, the application process, getting financial aid to help them pay for college, and everything that entails. So I specifically work, a lot of my time is with the 4th year students, the 12th graders. And so in doing that, when we implement Tier 1 services, I take into consideration different needs. And in the schools that I work at, we have a high population of immigrant students that are new to the country themselves, or low-income students, and many students whose parents did not go to college. And so they're unfamiliar with how to guide their student to attend college. And so in our services, we take all those parts into consideration and we teach all the students as if they've never done this before because they haven't. And the way we implement it is through our once-a-week homeroom classes. We provide lessons. We talk about everything about what are the options, how you specifically do the application to be able to present this. And we provide sometimes quizzes after our lessons, not to test them or to give them a grade of any sort. It's to get more feedback about what they learned or maybe what is the gap in what they didn't learn so that we can address it in the next lesson. And we are constantly modifying our lessons based on that data. We also look at the data of how many students are completing the applications, how many of the students are doing the application for financial aid to get government assistance for the university. So those are indicators that we look at. We also do a lot of one-on-one counseling in college and career. And in the questions that the students are asking us, it is a telling sign of what is missing from the lessons that we're giving. So we'll constantly modify, sometimes even within the same semester, we'll change the lesson to give that appropriate information. So those are the kind of things, and constantly talking to students. One of the things that Dr. Perry mentioned is that those direct services, when you're interacting with students and they feel comfortable talking to you, they're going to tell you what they don't understand, what they need, and then that's how you tailor that Tier 1 services that you're providing.
ありがとうございます。ペレ博士お願いいたします。
Thank you for the question. When we talk about Tier 1 services for school counselors in LAUSD, we need to broaden the idea of what counseling is. Counseling could happen in a desk. Counseling could happen in the playground. Counseling could happen in the classroom. When you do Tier 1 services, the idea is the delivery of an interaction, a delivery of one-on-one communication. It's building a relationship with the student. So, some of the activities that counselors do that are Tier 1 to help identify students is through a 9th grade or an 8th or 6th grade orientation. You know, from elementary to middle school or middle school to high school. We call it Summer Bridge. It's that induction activity that takes place, that we go over the expectations for the school, we go over workshops that sometimes our students deliver lessons on concepts like making and keeping friends, like how to study in a rigorous environment, how to communicate with your teachers, and this happens before they attend school. And counselors usually participate in these activities. So when I say redefine what counseling is, it doesn't mean a traditional model. It means activities that get students to interact and trust and understand that counselors, when they are in crisis, they are someone that they could turn to. When you look at data, you need to have a structure for it. We're lucky enough in LAUSD to have an integrated computerized system where stage by stage, counselors are able to log in notes about those students that were receiving Tier 1, 2, and 3 services in the past. We have a dashboard through our computer system where you could run reports on different indicators that include attendance, that include grades, that include referrals in the past. So not everything is done on paper anymore. Paper and pencil is gone in LAUSD. The focus is on logging it in the computer, taking notes, and doing your case counseling notes on the computer. So when they transfer from one level to the next, it's not lost. So what we do to identify at-risk students, we sometimes build a goal. If we wanted to target students with low attendance, we build an ASCA goal. 60%, those students with 6 or more missing unexcused absences will be identified as students that we will monitor. And then what are the indicators? We'll look at grades. We'll look at referrals of the past. We'll look at whether or not they are in a special category. So data analysis is most important, but if you don't have the system in place to get that data, that could be a problem. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございます。では林さん、お待たせしました。お願いします。
私はスクールソーシャルワーカーの、立場から聞かせていただきました。特に全員にアプローチする仕方とか、それから早期発見、予防教育っていうところでとてもシステマティックであると同時にお二人の熱意やとても温かい人柄っていうところにとても勉強になったと思っています。ありがとうございます。私たちスクールソーシャルワーカーはスクールカウンセラーと一緒にチームになって、学校の生徒たちに、対応して共同して対応しています。特にスクールソーシャルワーカーは学校外のいろいろな支援機関と、関わりをつけて、それで学校とつながって共同できるような機関っていうものを発掘したり、それから逆に学校の特徴を関係機関、支援機関に理解してもらうような働きかけをしています。ロサンゼルスの方には、スクールカウンセラーが私たちスクールソーシャルワーカーのような多職種と話し合う機会っていうのは ありますかっていうところを聞きたいです。はい、お願いします。
エリカ様お願いいたします。
Oh, definitely. In my school that we work at, we are lucky enough to have 4 social workers, 1 per grade level, and we also have 3 counselors per grade level. And there's a lot of collaboration between the social worker as well as the school counselors. Because they're part of a team. They work with all the students in that grade level. And so they inform each other to be able to provide services both on the academic and the social emotional side as well as the college and career side. And so there's constant communication and consultation. So that is happening all the time. And the connection with outside agencies, that generally comes, sometimes is provided, and I think Dr. Prey will be able to speak a little bit more about that, is provided by the district, a directory of agencies that they can reach out to, and that can come from the school counselor or for the social worker. And as an advocate for students, we also take initiative to learn the resources that are around our school community locally, and that's by reaching out to agencies, calling, as well as collaborating and learning from more experienced school counselors and social workers that may have been in that community for much longer and aware of those agencies. And so this creates this community of communication between those 2 entities. And then also professional development that happens outside of the school. Like Dr. Prey mentioned, they do lots of trainings, and this is not just to be able to do the training, but to provide a space where social workers and school counselors can come together outside of school to be able to discuss what needs are not met at a school, or to interchange ideas or interchange resources, and overall networking. And these are opportunities that are very useful, because I feel like the professional developments that I've attended really inform me to come up with better ideas or different ways to provide services for students, and therefore are integral to our profession to have these opportunities. But a lot of times, going back to social workers and school counseling, our offices are very close to each other, and it's very easy just to walk over and say, hey, I have this student, and say, oh yes, I've been working with this student, so on and so forth. And like as Dr. Prey mentioned, it's all documented as well in our system, so it's very easy for either entity to just look it up and then consult about those notes.
続いてペレ博士お願いいたします。
Thank you so much for the question. I could speak on my experience, and my experience and roles I've had for 25 years is that specifically as a school counselor, as an administrator over school counseling, and now as a district administrator or coordinator at that level. But I will tell you, some of my favorite friends are social workers, and people in your role, because they are partners with school counselors. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is that in LAUSD, being the second largest school district, we have multiple layers of support. Because while at the school site level, there is the person doing the daily work of the heavy lifting, of doing direct services. It's hard work. We understand that the system needs to be supportive for that person on the field. So I understand the question, which is, how do people collaborate? Depending if the school is lucky enough to have a social worker, because not all schools have one. All schools are mandated to have a counselor, but all schools are not mandated to have a social worker. So if a social worker is needed, though, then they ask for district level support. So then that means that there could be at the district level a person who is a social worker that supports maybe 5 schools or multiple schools, or there's a team that helps support them. So you could do case consultation. But at the schools that I've worked at, I've been lucky enough to lead teams with a counselor, a social worker, a college counselor, a school psychologist. And what I would do on a monthly basis, sometimes more times than necessary, is we would have collaborative meetings. And sometimes we would invite teachers in those meetings. Because guess what? Teachers are a part of the school that need to interact with the social worker, need to interact with the counselor. But I would encourage that if there aren't any key people outside of the school to help, that those points of contact with the experience to help support the school, because they have done that work for years, that would be key. I didn't get in my current position just because I wanted it. I had to work for it. So I needed to work for 18 years before I could be considered to be an administrator. But it's complicated when you look at the work that you're doing, because sometimes you have to deal with operations. You have to deal with mental health. You'll need to have to deal with child welfare department. But you are a good key to get the support that students need. But we're lucky that we have a big team that are very specific on the roles and responsibilities. So, thank you.
ありがとうございました。まだまだお話をお伺いしたいのですが、お時間の、関係上、ここで観客の皆様からの質問をご紹介させていただきます。はい、お時間の関係上、一つだけ申し訳ございません。子どもたちと接する上で、一番大切にしていることとは何でしょうか。エリカ様からお願いいたします。
Thank you. It's interesting because when I tell people that I'm a high school counselor, the first reaction I get is like, oh, you work with teenagers? Oh, that must be hard. And I always tell them that it's not that hard. One of the things that I always hold very important, especially when I'm talking to students one-on-one or doing any lessons, is one is respect. Because, you know, they're growing, they're learning from us, and if I respect a student, many times they will respect me back. Also listening, in that realm of respect is listening to students. A lot of students come from different family backgrounds where they're not being heard, or they're overlooked, or they're being compared to their brothers and sisters or cousins, and a lot of times they feel very isolated. And so in listening to them and really truly finding what is it that is the main concern, when, you know, my role as a college counselor is, you know, what is their fear, what is their hesitation, really relaxes them and opens them up to being able to have a conversation about those fears and concerns. So respect, I think, is first and foremost for me, and I've learned that that goes a long way, in any way in life, but particularly with students. I respect you, you respect me, and it goes a long way.
About what is the most important thing about respecting the children?
ありがとうございます。では最後になりました、ペレ博士、お願いいたします。
Thank you so much. So I believe the question is, what is the most important thing when interacting with children? There's so many. It's hard to pick one. But I will tell you, when you are authentically present and listening and using the skills that you've been trained to use, then students will smile. Students will respond. Students will respect you. If you are mean, give a stern look, not have good advice, have your agenda, not their agenda or best interest, then chances are there's a reason why they're not coming to you. Because they're scared of you. So it's always my philosophy that I treat students the way I want to be treated. So, and I just remember all of the good memories of when people interacted with me positively, and that's what I think how people should interact with children. Because if they don't trust you, they're not going to get the help they need. And it's about serving the students best. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございました。はい、これで最後になります。ご質問を、頂戴いたしました会場の皆様、ありがとうございました。では、そろそろお時間が近づいてまいりましたので、これにて第2部を終了させていただきます。第1部、第2部を通して大変貴重なご講演をいただきました。皆様にもしっかり伝わったと思います。これをもちまして本日のフォーラムを終了させていただきます。皆様ご清聴ありがとうございました。